The river smelled of blood, smoke, and steel. Robb Stark sat atop his grey direwolf-bannered horse, grey wind prowling silently beside him, muzzle stained red. The battlefield beyond the stone bridge of the twins was chaos-broken spears, dead horses, and bodies heaped so thick the grass had vanished. Crows circled, feasting already. But it was not just any battlefield. Was the place Tywin Lannister fell, and everything changed. He had never intended to fight Tywin here, but the old lion, reckless in his pride, had come north with too many soldiers and too little patience. The Freys were supposed to let the Lannister army pass. Instead, Walder Frey betrayed them in secret, sealing the gates behind Tywin. Once Robb's men sprang the trap, a betrayal bought not with gold but promises. Robb had bent reluctantly, offering Frey one of his cousins to marry and titles in the Riverlands. Unlike his past misstep with Talisa, this time he had listened to his bannermen. Catelyn had said it best. You don't win wars by following your heart, Robb. You win them by breaking others. Now, Tywin Lannister, Warden of the West, the man whose very name was spoken in whispers, lay dead, cut down in the mud like a common knight. Seer Brynden Tully had taken his head. Robb had watched it happen, and even now, as the sun rose over the twins, he didn't feel triumph. He felt cold. Your Grace, Roose Bolton's voice broke his thoughts. Always calm to calm. Lord Edmure has secured the western flank. The lion banners are burning. We've taken 1,000 prisoners. Seer Kavon is among them. Good, Robb said softly. His breath misted, and the bridge, ours. The Freys didn't lose a single man. Roose didn't smile when he said it, but there was something behind his eyes. Disgust, envy. Robb looked over to the keep, where Lord Walder Frey waited, hidden and trembling behind his stone walls. The old man had helped the North for now, but Robb would never trust him. He'd learned he wouldn't make the same mistake twice. A raven took flight from the twins' tallest tower, likely flying south. Let them know, he thought. Let the whole realm know. The North remembers. News of Tywin's death shook the Seven Kingdoms like an earthquake. In King's Landing, Joffrey, Baratheon threw a goblet at his council and screamed for heads to roll. Queen Cersei locked herself in her chambers for days, her grief twisted with fury. Without Tywin's shadow, her grip on the throne wavered. The Tyrells, once eager allies, began whispering of betrayal. Margaery's smiles grew thinner. Tyrion drank more. Not just because his father was gone, but because now the war was lost. The gold mines in the west were still dry. With Tywin dead, the Lannister armies were splintered. Many refused to follow Kavon, others fled home. And the worst part, the small folk cheered Robb Stark's name. The young wolf, they called him, breaker of lions. But Robb's victory came with consequences. He had to make hard choices fast. Winterfell was still in ruins, taken by the Ironborn and now abandoned. Bran and Rickon were believed dead, though whispers spoke of 2 boys seen travelling under false names. The Boltons urged Robb to strike east and claim Harrenhal. The wanted him crowned again king in the north and Trident. And yet, the war wasn't over. The south still held the Iron Throne, and Stannis Baratheon, brooding and righteous, was gathering fire and steel in the east. We don't need the Iron Throne, Catelyn said quietly. Alone with her son under the godswood are the twins. Let the south burn. Bring our people home. Robb looked at the weirwood face, red sap like dried tears. They'll never let USB, not while a Stark breathes. She didn't answer. She didn't need to. That night, Robb held a feast not to celebrate, but to honor the dead. Men drank in silence. The great Jon sat with a new scar across his eye. Smal Jon Umber swore revenge on Lannisters yet unborn. Blackfish Tully barely touched his ale. Robb didn't eat at all. Talisa sat beside him, her hand resting on his, silent and strong. She was with child now. He hadn't told anyone. He would eventually, but not yet. Not until he knew the North was safe. Not until the wolves had finished what they started. The raven from the twins reached King's Landing in 3 days. Its black wings carried more than just news. They carried the collapse of power. When the message was placed into Queen Cersei's hands, she read the seal once, then twice, as if disbelief could change what was written. Her breath caught. Her fingers trembled. Tywin Lannister dead. His head taken. His army scattered. The twins lost. She dropped the scroll like it burned. Joffrey stormed into the chamber moments later, demanding to know why the servants had fled from the Queen Mother's screams. Did the Stark whore write you a poem? He jeered, drunk on wine and arrogance. Cersei didn't speak. She simply handed him the scroll. Joffrey read it aloud, too loudly. Robb Stark has broken the Lannister host at the twins. Tywin Lannister slain in battle. Sir Cavan captured. Sir Gregor Clegane missing, presumed dead. The Freys have declared for the North. What is this? A jest? Cersei's lips curled. Not in a smile, in something darker. We've lost, Joffrey. No, I am the king. You are a child, sitting on your grandfather's throne, she snapped, her voice sharp and venomous, and now that throne has no army, no coin, and no respect. For once, Joffrey was silent, but only for a moment. I want Robb Stark's head. I want his direwolf flayed and brought to me. You'll have nothing, she said coldly, unless we act now. Meanwhile, in the North, Robb didn't rest. The Freys, now bound by steel and fear, opened their coffers and bridges. Robb used them both. Edmure was dispatched to Riverrun to secure the Riverlands. The Great Jon was sent to crack open the Westerland's border towns, burning gold mines and hunting Lannister loyalists. But Robb had one goal in mind: finish what Tywin started down, destroy everything the Lannisters built. With Roose Bolton and Lord Karstark, he moved south through the western roads, gathering small folk along the way. He didn't conquer cities, he liberated them. Everywhere he went, peasants dropped their tools and knelt. At High Heart, an old woman whispered, "The Wolf King returns." The last time the North came this far, dragons answered. This time, only. Fire follows him, but Robb wasn't unchallenged. Stannis Baratheon sent a raven. Its message was clear. The boy King Joffrey wears a bastard's crown. You call yourself king, yet serve the old gods. I offer alliance in righteousness. Bend the knee to the one true king. We will burn the Lannisters together. Robb burned the letter without replying. He had no interest in kings from Dragonstone. In the shadows, though, other threats grew. Lord Roose Bolton remained by Robb's side, loyal in action but cold in spirit. Robb noticed how Bolton's men never drank with the rest, how their campfires were always silent. Roose watched everything and said nothing. Catelyn noticed too. Roose is not Ned, she warned one night. He doesn't believe in honor. He believes in power. Be careful. I'm always careful, Robb lied. He wanted to believe he could manage them all: Boltons, Freys, bannerman with wounded pride and shifting loyalties. But he was only 19, and every day the cost of victory weighed heavier. Then came the letters from the Vale. Lysa Arryn, always elusive, had finally agreed to meet with Robb's envoys. She wouldn't send knights, not yet, but she offered something else. Sansa Stark, alive, safe in the Eyrie. The message was signed. In a shaking, awkward hand, Littlefinger has protected me. He says the north rises, and with it, so shall I tell my brother I remember everything. Robb sat long into the night with that letter. He read it again and again. His little sister, still breathing, and Petyr Baelish's name woven into it all. He would find Sansa, but not before dealing with the rotten root still festering in King's Landing. By midwinter, Robb was ready. He had split his army in two. Half under Edmure and the Blackfish were holding the Riverlands and harassing any Lannister loyalists retreating west. The other half, his half, was marching toward Harrenhal. He knew Cersei would try to hold the capital. He knew she'd call on the Tyrells. He knew they'd be desperate, but desperation made people foolish. And Robb had one advantage left. The North remembers. And so did he. The fires of Harrenhal lit the night sky like a dying god's last scream. Smoke curled above the black towers as Robb Stark's army took the ruin without resistance. The Lannisters had already fled. The Mountain, once the butcher of the Riverlands, had disappeared into Mythsome, said he was dead. Others that he'd returned to Casterly Rock to raise hell from within. But none of that mattered now. Harrenhal, cursed and broken, was a symbol, and Robb claimed it not as a king but as a message. The young wolf was coming. Inside the melted halls of Harrenhal, Robb stood with Lord Karstark, Roose Bolton, and Talisa. She was quieter these days, paler too. The child she carried had made her wary, as if she could feel the ghosts of the war pressing in. Why here? Talisa whispered as she looked around. This place is ... wrong. Because Tywin Lannister made it his seat of war, Robb replied. Because he turned this place into a graveyard. Now I'll do the same to his memory. They found cages, dozens, some empty, some ... not. Men who had starved with their mouths sewn shut, girls with teeth missing, rats, blood. Robb turned away from one cell and vomited in the corner. Even Roose Bolton seemed unmoved. This is what the Lannisters left behind, Robb said bitterly. This is their order. No, Bolton said coolly. This is what happens when men stop fearing kings. News spread quickly, was lost. Robb Stark held the Riverlands and half the West. The small folk began to call him the Wolf King. Bards sang that he rode with crows and wolves, and that even the trees whispered his name. In King's Landing, the crown trembled. Tyrion, now serving once more as hand in desperation, argued day and night with his sister. We don't have enough gold to pay the sellswords, he snapped. We don't have enough grain to survive. The winter, and if Robb takes the Reach, he won't, Cersei spat. Margaery Tyrell will keep her family in line. She wants to be queen more than she wants to breathe. But Margaery was already whispering to Olenna Tyrell. Do you want me married to a mad boy with no army, or to the man they're calling the Northern Dragon? She asked her grandmother softly. Olenna didn't smile. She rarely did these days. Kings die, she said. Queens survive. Robb sent ravens to Dorne next, not to beg, but to offer. He promised vengeance. He offered justice for Martell, for Rhaegar's murdered children, For every slight the South had buried under silks and shadows. Doran Martell replied with a single sentence. If your blade cuts deeper than your words, then we shall speak again. But in the north, darkness still lingered. Roose Bolton received a letter under seal, one he didn't show to Robb. It bore the flayed man of House Bolton and came from his bastard, Ramsay. Inside it, Ramsay detailed his hold over Winterfell. He had taken it, ruled it, and claimed Reek as his prize. He asked his father one thing, permission to wear the title Lord of the Dreadfort and be named Roose's heir. Roose said nothing of it to Robb, but he did smile just faintly. Robb didn't know yet. He believed his home was ashes, that Theon Greyjoy had burned it to the ground. He didn't know Bran and Rickon were alive and far beyond the wall's edge, hiding beneath old names and darker skies. He didn't know that Jon Snow, his half-brother, now wore the black of the Night's Watch, but marched toward death in the land of wildlings and shadows. He believed he had lost nearly everything, so he fought like a man with nothing left to lose. And then the letters arrived from the Vale once more. Petyr Baelish had left the Eyrie. Sansa was no longer hidden in the mountains. She had been married to a noble of the Vale, though the name was scratched out in the letter. The words were frantic, panicked. She was gone. The next message came from the Riverlands ravens, dead in cages, mutilated. The Bolton sigil had been smeared across a hill in blood. A warning. Something had shifted. Enemies weren't just behind the gates of King's Landing anymore. They were within the wolf's own camp. And one of them had Robb's trust. Snow fell over Harrenhal like ash from a dying sky. Robb stood alone on the parapets, the wind dragging at his cloak as he stared toward the south. Every day the war moved forward, but every night he felt further from home. The road to victory was paved with names, blood, and compromise. He had buried too many, killed too many. And now he was losing more than just battles. He was losing pieces of himself. Talisa had grown distant, not cold, but careful. She no longer reached for his hand when he returned from war meetings. She no longer smiled at his jokes. Something in her had shifted. You should rest, she said softly that night as they sat in their tent. You haven't slept. He looked at her. The child in her belly had grown. He could see the curve now, even under her thick furs. It should have brought joy. Instead, it felt like a noose. One more thing the war could take from him. I can't, he admitted. I see them when I close my eyes. The boys at the Twins, the ones we lost outside Riverrun, the ones I sent to die so we could hold this cursed ruin. Talisa didn't answer. She simply placed his hand over her stomach. Then fight for what's left. But what was left? The Vale had gone silent again. Petyr Baelish was missing. Sansa's trail was cold. Edmure's messengers spoke of ghost soldiers in the west, raiding supply lines and burning sigils in the night. The Lannisters no longer fought like lions, they fought like cornered rats. And Roose Bolton, he was watching, always watching. Robb had begun to notice it more now, how Roose's men never lost discipline, how their blades were always too clean, how they lingered too long in towns they were meant to liberate. He brought it up during a council. You've seen the reports, Robb said, eyes on Roose. Civilians tortured. Sigils burned into the skin of Lannister men. This isn't justice. This is slaughter. Lord Karstark chuckled bitterly. You think Tywin Lannister fought with honor? You think the Mountain asked names before he raped them? They burned our lands. Let them taste what we tasted. Roos's voice came soft, almost polite. The North remembers, but it also punishes. Robb slammed his fist onto the map. We are not monsters. No, Roos replied calmly. But monsters win wars. Then came the betrayal. Not a blade in the dark, not poison in a cup, but something worse. A raven from the Dreadfort, bearing the seal of House Bolton and words that bled. Winterfell is ours. Theon Greyjoy captured. The false princes were never killed. The Stark boys live. Robb read the message again and again. Bran and Rickon alive in his family's home. And Roose Bolton's bastard held them both. He stared at Roose across the council table. The older man's face was a mask of courtesy. Calm, empty. You knew, Robb whispered. You knew he was alive. I suspected, Roose said. But you had your war, your grace. I thought you should focus. Cuss. Voice rang with sudden fury. You mean to say that while we bled from the neck to the reach, your bastard sat in our house? It is still my house, Roose replied sharply, and he held it for the North. Robb's hand fell to his sword. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. You dare defend him? Roose didn't flinch. I defend victory. The Greyjoys are broken. Your brothers live. We have reclaimed the North. I offer you facts, not feelings. Robb turned to his bannermen. Some stared at the floor. Others looked to Roose. The room had never felt colder. That night, Robb sent a secret raven to Howland Reed of Greywater Watch, one of the last loyal men his father trusted. The letter was short. Find my brothers. Bring them to me. Do not trust the bastard. But it might have already been too late. The next morning, Roose Bolton requested leave. To return to Winterfell, he said with a polite bow, My presence may prevent further bloodshed. I will ensure your brothers are protected. Robb had no choice. If he said no, he'd lose the North to open rebellion. If he said yes, he handed his family to a man who viewed loyalty as a blade. He nodded. Go. Protect them. Roose smiled, just slightly. As you command, Your Grace. 3 days later, Talisa collapsed. The maesters tried everything. She bled for hours. The child was lost. Robb never left her side, not even when she screamed his name in pain and fury. I gave up everything for you, she sobbed afterward, clutching her flat stomach. And this war took it. Robb held her, but he couldn't speak, because he knew the truth. He had nothing left to give. Snowstorm winds howled across the riverlands, as if the old gods themselves were mourning. Talisa no longer spoke. She ate little, slept less. And though she lay beside Robb at night, she might as well have been a world away. He had lost the child, but Talisa had lost something deeper. Her belief in the man who called himself king. Robb didn't blame her. He barely recognized himself anymore. Every command he gave felt like it came from a stranger's mouth. Every victory tasted like ash. His war had started for honor, for justice, for his father. And yet the deeper he marched south, the more he resembled the men he once swore to defeat. He rode with a smaller council now. Lord Karstark remained fiercely loyal but dangerous, violent. Brynden Tully still advised him when he could, but most of the river lords were busy putting out fires in the west, literal and political. The phrase had grown cold again, their letters short and passive, especially after Talisa lost the child. The alliance stands, Lord Walder's raven said, but it limps. Even the common folk had changed. Where once they cheered the young wolf, They now watched from behind shuttered windows. Fear had replaced admiration. Robb felt it, the shift. The war was his, but the people no longer were. Then came the worst blow. A raven from Deepwood Motte brought word from Asher Greyjoy. Balon Greyjoy had died. Rumors of a storm, others said. A fall from a bridge. The Iron Islands were in chaos. Now is the time to strike the Ironborn, Karstark urged. Reclaim the coasts while they fight each other. But Robb barely heard him. His eyes stayed on the bottom of the scroll. The bastard of Bolton holds Winterfell in your name. Another lie, another trap, and yet no proof. His brothers were ghosts. The Boltons ruled unchecked. And the last name Robb wanted to hear had returned, Ramsay. That night he summoned a private audience with Talisa. She sat before the fire, thinner than he remembered. Her eyes carried exhaustion far beyond her years. I know I failed you, he said quietly. But when this ends, when I sit on the Iron Throne, stop, she whispered. He blinked. I don't want a throne, Robb. I wanted peace, a life, a future for our child. Her voice cracked. Now you speak of ruling, but I don't think you even remember why you started. Robb stepped toward her. It's for the North, for my father. For no, she said, standing. This is about vengeance now. It's about proving you were right. You lost your brothers, your home, your father, and you're afraid that if you stop fighting, it'll all be for nothing. Robb felt the words like a sword through his armor. I'm trying to hold this. All together, he said, because if I let it go, then you're just a boy playing at crowns, she whispered, and you've forgotten who you were before the war. The next day, he marched south again, toward King's Landing, toward fire. But behind him, the cracks in his army widened. Roose Bolton's absence festered like rot. Lord Karstark began executing Lannister prisoners without trial. One was only 15. Robb had the boy buried with the Northerners. The next night, Karstark defied him again. This time, Robb acted. In front of the entire host, Robb Stark took Karstark's head with his own sword. He betrayed justice, he declared, blood staining his furs. This war will not be won with cruelty. But even as the army cheered in bursts, Robb saw it in their faces. Fear, not loyalty. In the shadows, darker whispers moved. The Freys had begun exchanging ravens with King's Landing. A rider from the Vale brought word that Littlefinger had returned to court and had been made Lord Paramount of the Trident in Robb's absence. Cersei was promising titles, gold, peace, and Walder Frey was listening. That night, Talisa came to Robb's tent. She did not speak. She simply lay beside him, her hand pressed to his chest. He thought, maybe, for a moment, they had found their way back to each other. But when he awoke, she was gone. In her place was a letter. I am going to Riverrun. I cannot be part of this anymore. Not like this. I pray you return to me, Robb. Not as a king, but as the man I loved. He. Read it in silence. Folded it, and then burned it without a word. He turned to Greywind, resting beside the war table. The direwolf stirred, sensing something. Something near, something not right. Robb stared into the flickering candlelight, his voice low. Everyone. I love leaves. Greywind growled softly in the dark. The riverlands were drowning in whispers. By the time Robb's host reached the Blackwater Rush, every bird in the realm seemed to carry rumors instead of truth. The Lannisters had begun to fracture Queen Cersei. clung to the iron throne with only the gold cloaks and her lies. The Tyrells were watching like hawks, waiting to choose the winning side. And Petyr Baelish, no one knew where he was, but somehow everything still smelled like him. But the most troubling whisper of all came from a campfire on the edge of Robb's army. A soldier spoke low, not knowing Lord Umber was nearby. They say the phrase, "hold a grudge," that Lord Walder's sick of bending his knee to a boy king who gave him a whore's child and no respect. The great John dragged the man before Robb within the hour, begged for mercy once he saw your face. Great John said, "Should I take his tongue?" "No," Robb replied after a long pause. "Give him food and a horse." The others blinked in confusion. "If Lord Walder is plotting against me," Robb continued coldly, "I want word of it, travelling fast. Let the phrase know I'm watching." But inside, he knew the truth. He'd taken the twins by oath, not trust. And now the toll would come due. By late moonrise, another raven arrived, this time from Edmure Tully. "They invite us to the twins for a great feast. Walder Frey offers to renew his vows and make peace with you before the next campaign." A feast, an apology. It smelled of poison, but war makes men swallow bitter things. Robb summoned his bannermen that night in Harrenhal's broken great hall, the cold stones echoing with every footstep. The banners of House Stark still hung, but the shadows beneath them grew longer. "I say we go," said Lord Tytos Blackwood. "Break bread, hold the alliance." "They'll kill us in our cups," warned the Blackfish. Robb looked to his men. "My father trusted honor," he said, "and he lost his head." "Silence. I trust steel," he finished. They rode. For the twins days later, the banners of the north flapping in icy wind. But Greywind growled the entire journey. He snarled at every tree, every stranger, even at Robb. At night, he refused to sleep near the campfire. Talisa had once said wolves could sense what men denied. Robb wondered what Greywind saw. When they reached the twins, Walder Frey greeted them with his usual mix of sneer and senility. "My halls are open to you, your grace," he said with an overdone bow. "A king should be fed before he is crowned or buried, I suppose." Some laughed. Robb didn't. The feast began with meat and music. The Freys poured wine, raised cups, praised the young wolf. Robb raised his own only once to toast the future, though the words felt bitter in his mouth. Talisa had not come. She remained in Riverrun, as promised. He hoped she would stay there. He hoped he wouldn't die tonight. But death did not come that night. The wine was not poisoned. The food was not laced with venom. The knives stayed at the Freys' sides. Instead, Walder Frey offered something else: his granddaughter, Roslyn Frey, to marry one of Robb's bannermen. "It is not enough that the King of the North pays a debt," Lord Walder said. "His men must too, or there is no trust." And so Edmure Tully, Robb's uncle, reluctantly agreed. The wedding would be held in 3 days. Another feast, another chance. Robb agreed, not because he trusted Walder, but because the war would not be won in open fields anymore. It would be won in shadows. That night, Robb walked the battlements of the twins alone. The towers loomed above him like teeth. Below, the river ran black under the moonlight. He heard a sound behind him, boots, but not stealthy. It was the Blackfish. "You shouldn't be here alone," Brynden said. "I was thinking of my father." The old knight nodded. "He came here once, too, before you were born, for another war, and he died because of it. He died because he thought honor could survive in a world ruled by vipers. Robb turned to him. And what do you think? I think, said Brynden, drawing his cloak tight, that if you go south again, you won't return. 3 days passed. The wedding was held. The feast began. Laughter, music, dancing, and still no death. Some men even began to relax. Maybe the Freys truly wanted peace. Maybe the war had turned. Maybe Robb could march on King's Landing with the River Lords and leave all of this behind. But on the 4th night, Greywind began to howl, far from the keep, alone in his pen, and no one heard him. Because the doors to the hall were locked. The musicians stopped, the smiles faded, and Walder Frey raised his hand. The music stopped, just for a second, a single breath, and in that silence, everything shattered. Robb turned his head instinctively, hand reaching for his sword. But it was too late. Steel flashed where wine cups had once been. The musicians dropped their fiddles and drew crossbows from beneath their cloaks. The feast turned to a massacre. Arrows flew, screams rose, and blood painted the walls of House Frey. Edmure was the first to fall 3 bolts to the chest before he could even stand. Blackwood men grabbed their swords, but the Freys were already among them, knives drawn, throats opened. Women screamed, men stumbled, tables overturned. Robb ducked as a bolt zipped past his head and slammed into the wall behind him. He rolled across the floor, sword out, shield raised. He could barely see through the smoke of the torches, the blood, the bodies. Greywind, he roared, though the direwolf was far away, trapped, caged, unheard. A man lunged at him with a dagger. Robb caught his wrist, drove his blade through the man's ribs, and kicked him off. The doors were bolted, the windows narrow. They were boxed in like pigs in a slaughterhouse. He looked for familiar faces, found the Blackfish, fighting like a man possessed, cutting through Freys as if vengeance guided his sword. Lord Tytos. Blackwood had a broken arm and blood in his beard, but still fought beside his sons. But too many were already dead. His bannermen, his allies, his friends, the army he had bled for, gone in moments. And Walder Frey, that snake, he stood atop, the dais untouched, a cup in hand, watching like a bored god at the end of the world. You broke your oath, Robb shouted, voice hoarse, eyes burning. Walder smiled. I honored it. You wanted my bridge, I gave it. You wanted my allegiance, I gave it. You spit on my daughter for your foreign queen, and now you get nothing. Robb charged forward, leaping over a table, blade flashing. He reached the dais only to be tackled by 2 guards in chainmail. They drove him down, hard. His sword skittered across the floor. Robb gasped for breath, blood in his mouth. Walder leaned in, still smiling. You lost the child too, didn't you? He hissed. All that blood, and for what? A dead wife, a stillborn heir, a northern crown that crumbles like old bread. Robb spat in his face. Walder simply wiped it off with a silk sleeve. Bring him, he ordered. They dragged Robb from the hall, his limbs heavy, pain exploding in his side where someone had cracked a rib. Outside, the night was deathly quiet. No horns, no shouts, just the crackle of flames and the soft splash of water against the twins' bridge. He heard Greywind again, howling, screaming, then silence. They had killed his wolf. They had killed his soul. They took him to the bridge, where torches lined the wooden path and the river below reflected the moon like shattered glass. Walder's men flanked him on either side. Ahead stood a shadower man in dark armor, flayed sigil gleaming red. Roose Bolton. Robb's heart sank. You, he choked. You were part of this. Roose didn't deny it. He stepped forward, slow and careful. You became a symbol, Robb. And symbols get people killed. The war needed to end. The North needed stability. You betrayed everything, Robb snarled. Roose stared at him with pale, dead eyes. No, I survived. Robb lunged, even bound, even bleeding. But Roose stepped back with unnatural speed and plunged a dagger straight into Robb's heart. But he didn't twist it. He leaned close. The Lannisters send their regards. And then he pushed. Robb stumbled, back, 1 step, 2, then off the bridge. He hit the water in silence. The cold swallowed him whole. Above, Walder Frey laughed. Roose disappeared into the dark. The torches flickered in the wind. And the war Robb Stark began to avenge his father ended, with him sinking beneath the river, blood trailing. Behind him, like a northern crown, lost in the current. But somewhere, far away, a boy with broken legs dreamed of a wolf falling, and a girl with a face of death whispered a name into the night, and the North. The North remembered. The river carried him. For hours, maybe longer, Robb's body drifted with the current arms, outstretched, eyes frozen open, crownless and broken. The blood washed away, but the wounds remained. No songs would be sung here, no pyre built, no mourning, only the cold. Mercy of water. The young wolf was dead. But his war wasn't, not yet. In the far north, snow blanketed the wild beyond the wall. A crippled boy named Bran Stark sat in the roots of a gnarled weirwood, his skin pale, his eyes rolled white. In his vision, he saw the river, he saw the bridge, he saw his brother fall, and he screamed. But no one was there to hear it, save for Mira and the boy who could see too much. He's gone, Bran whispered when he woke. They took him. They took them all. In the Riverlands, Arya Stark had finally crossed the Trident under a false name. She heard of the massacre not from a raven, but from a butcher's wife, who whispered the story like a curse. The Freys closed the doors and opened their blades. Arya did not cry. She did not speak. That night, she slipped away from the camp and found a quiet stream. There, she whispered to the water, Robb. Then she opened her list and added 3 names. Walder Frey, Roose Bolton, Lothar Frey. She would need more space soon. In Riverrun, Talisa sat in the dark. The Maester entered quietly, holding a letter. It's confirmed, he said. She didn't take it. She didn't need to. Her husband, her king, was gone. For a moment, she thought the world would end, but it didn't. The silence remained. The night carried on. Somewhere, a baby cried. Somewhere else, men laughed. War didn't stop for grief. Talisa didn't cry. She simply looked at the candle on the table and blew it out. But not everyone mourned. In King's Landing, Queen Cersei raised a goblet and drank deep. Joffrey demanded Robb's head be brought to him, mounted on Greywind's body. Pycelle stammered that the body was lost. It doesn't matter, Cersei sneered. The wolf is dead. But Tyrion, sitting quietly at the table, watched her with disgust. You think this ends the war? He asked. I know it, she replied. Tyrion finished his wine. No, you've made the North a graveyard. And graveyards remember. In the Dread Fort, Ramsay Snow celebrated in his own way by flaying a dozen Riverlanders alive and painting a wolf's head on their skin. He wrote to his father, demanding legitimacy. I gave you Winterfell. I broke the Greyjoys. I deserved the name Bolton. Roose gave it. Ramsay Bolton, Lord of the Dreadfort. And the North groaned. But not all was lost. Deep in the neck, Howland. Reed received Robb's final raven. He did not answer. He packed his things. And then, silently, he and his children slipped into the swamps. They would find the Stark boys. They would protect the blood of the wolf. They would wait, because winter hadn't come yet. But it was close. And far, far across the sea, in a city of dust and dragons, a queen with silver hair heard whispers in the wind. A king has died, his crown drowned in the river, but his people, his wolves, still howl. Daenerys Targaryen said nothing, but that night she dreamt of a direwolf standing before a dragon, both covered in ash and snow. Years later, bards would sing of Robb Stark. Some would call him a fool, a boy king who rose too fast and died too young. Others would call him the last true king Westeros had seen. But in the north, where the wind howls louder than time, and the trees still whisper names in the dark, one truth remained. The young wolf died, but the north remembers, and vengeance never forgets.